Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Baumhauer's Victory Grill here in Tuscaloosa. I'm Eli Gold, joined tonight by our special media guest from the Tuscaloosa News, Cecil Hurt. And joining us in just seconds will be the head football coach of the Crimson Tide, who just now is entering the restaurant, Coach Nick Saban. Cecil, great to see you, sir. How you doing?
Fine, Eli. How was your off season?
It was rapid. It went by in a hurry this time, but I'm glad it's behind us. I'm ready for football. You?
Always glad. August is a long month.
It is. You're counting down every day, every minute, aren't you?
It is. It is. You know, people are ready to play. The players are ready to play. They're tired of practicing every day. I'm sure the coaches are more than ready to play. So this is always a good Thursday.
Making his way now to the stage here at Baumhauer's, the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide, just getting himself all wired up with his headset. Coach Nick Saban is with us. Coach, good to see you. How you been?
I've been great. How are you?
I am well. You know, the older that Cecil and Tom get, the quicker these years seem to go by. Isn't that the truth? Not for you and I. We don't age. But it's nice to see you. It's been a long time since we got together in Atlanta.
Well, it sure has, but, you know, it seemed like it went awful quick.
It did. You're
but
right.
we're looking forward to it. I mean, we're excited about it. These guys have worked hard for a long, long time. You know, they work all through the off-season. We go through off-season program. We have summer conditioning. They have spring practice. Now we've been through a long fall camp. And, you know, I think it's time to find out who we are. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of identity that this team can actually create for themselves. And one of the things that I've tried to tell them is, you know, nobody's playing last year's team. They're playing this year's team. So this year's team has got to be ready to, you know, look in the mirror and know that they've done all the things that they can do to go out and play their best and be able to sustain it in the game for 60 minutes.
Folks, if you'd like to join the conversation, it's the same phone number we have been using here for decades. 877-202-BAMA, 877-202-BAMA. That's the Academy Sports and Outdoors Hotline, and you're tuned into the Nick Saban Show, presented by Alpha Insurance. For the best agents in the business, call Alpha. And you talk about one of the best in his business. Cecil Hurt from the Tuscaloosa News is here. And Cecil, welcome in again, and you've got the first honors here this evening.
Thank you, Eli. I'm so excited to have the first honors because Coach probably has figured out that sometimes in the job you have to do what you have to do. So I'm going to ask a three-part question.
And I'm only capable of asking one part at a time.
I'll do it. August preparation is over. How, in establishing an identity, as you mentioned, how did your candidates at the quarterback position perform?
Well, you know, the quarterbacks have both played extremely well, especially in the second scrimmage and especially throughout practice. I think both guys, you know, are weapons to our team. Both guys are in their own, you know, sort of skill set, create problems for the other team that we play. So, you know, in some ways, I can't understand why nobody else understands that it may not be a bad thing to have a role for both of those guys, you know, some kind of way in the game. And, you know, I think it's fair to both guys. I think, you know, they both really earned the opportunity based on what they've done since they've been here as players. Jalen's played a lot of games that we won, and, you know, Tua's come in and played very well in the biggest game that we ever had in the championship game, so he deserves the right to play too. So there really is only one question that everybody wants to know, and that's who's going to run out on the field first. And I'm not going to tell you that.
But Cecil, you phrased the question magnificently. That's why you are who you are.
He took care of part two, or didn't really take care of part two, which is, has the decision been made in what way that the offensive staff and, of course, Coach Saban wants to handle it? And part three, which he did answer, was, is there any way I could get it out of you if it had been made?
No.
Now, three I understood from your previous answer.
You know, what I really can't understand is, you know, why you all think that I should tell you as if I tell you, the other team won't know.
Yeah, Petrino won't hear it.
I can't ever figure that out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you're going to keep a secret?
What do you think Coach Petrino is telling his team about the bunch he'll be facing this weekend?
Well, I'm sure he's telling them that he thinks they can win. I mean, I'm sure of that. I'm sure that they have a lot of players back. You know, they've got a good team, especially on offense. They've got 8 or 9 starters back and a lot of guys that have played a lot of football. And Jawan Pass is a very, very capable quarterback. He played well when he played last year. He was a very highly recruited, highly talented guy in high school that we actually recruited really, really hard here. Defensively, there's a few more unknowns. They've got a new defensive coordinator. They lost more players on defense. They have new faces, guys that sat out last year, transfers, you know, some junior college guys. So we feel like we know the system. We don't feel like we know the personnel very well, you know, on that side of the ball. But, you know, I'm sure in all first games, you know, everybody thinks they're going to have a great season and a great team.
Sure.
So the important thing is that you can change the way the other team thinks. And there's some critical components to that. First of all, it takes a tremendous amount of discipline to be able to stay focused on doing what you need to do throughout the game, play in and play out. You know, results, you know, are not always great. Everybody focuses on results. But yet results seduce you into not having success, because if you fail, you get frustrated. If you have success, you get complacent. So if you don't focus on the process of what you've got to do to keep playing, one play at a time, and be able to do that emotionally and psychologically and not get frustrated when you don't have success, something goes bad, you can't get frustrated, you can't create anxiety. You got to stay focused on what you have to do. And that's the one thing that has been a critical point for us, you know, with our team, with younger players, you know, that they have a more difficult problem following that sort of process that I laid out there of being able to stay focused. You know, we even kind of changed the way we practice to try to get them to do that. You know, I've never done this. We've always had periods in practice, but I made first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. All right, so, and I gave the players a minute break in between every quarter and said, okay, now you got to refocus, you got to recenter, you got to get your intensity back. All right, we're going to do the next thing, but, you know, so, you know, that's the challenge when you have young players, and it'll be interesting to see how these guys respond, you know, in real competition in a real game.
The question I had, then I'll open it up to our listeners and to Cecil again. I believe it was 8 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, when Coach Petrino was at Arkansas and he had the big, tall quarterback, Mallett, who had a good start to that ball game against a young Alabama team. How much of what you look at on that tape, if any, was unique to that team, or how much could you learn about what's in Coach Petrino's head preparing for Saturday? Is it germane in any way at all?
You know, all those plays they hit early in the game when we got behind 14-0, I didn't have to look at the film. I remember every one of those plays.
Sure
I remember the formation. I remember the defensive call. I remember who busted. Courtney Upshaw didn't drop. I remember every one of them. I don't have to watch the film.
Sorry, Courtney.
I can't always remember all the good plays, but I sure do remember the bad ones.
And how many of those are able to be taught to the players? It's stuff that happened and say, hey, don't let this happen Saturday.
Yeah, and they're all things that are apparent in what they do now. All right, so, you know, we did a 6-game breakdown on these guys. So those plays, those formations, those motion adjustments that we made mental errors on, you know, early in that game. And to be honest with you, some of it is our fault as coaches, because when you have a lot of multiples, like a coach like Coach Petrino, who's a pro-style coach, who's going to run the same patterns but with different presentations all the time. You know, when I was at the Browns and we played the 49ers, you know, I used to just tell the players, you know, they're going to run these patterns, but they're not going to run them out of the formations that we're going to practice. They're going to do them out of some other kind of way, and it's going to be some other guy on the team that has to do it. So everybody has to understand the concept. So that's how he coaches. That's how he is. So you're going to get a different presentation than what we practice. And players have to be able to understand the concept and adapt to it. And, you know, that's always a challenge. And then hopefully you make the adjustments you need to make in the game.
Yeah, it's not easy. Cecil, jump in again.
To move off the offensive side into the defensive side that people don't ask about, I don't think quite
At
as
all.
often.
At all.
could make a long list of guys who are currently playing NFL exhibition games off last year's team. Minka, Sean Dion, Rashawn's out. But to lose that many guys, who are some of the players that have had a good August and you'll count on Saturday?
Well, I think the biggest issue on defense is a lot of new faces in the secondary, depth in the front seven. Those are the two major issues. And, Trayvon Diggs has had a really good fall camp. He had a really good spring. Savion Smith has, come along and understands a little bit better. Patrick Surtain is a good freshman player who is probably going to end up playing quite a bit, at some point in time this season. Xavier McKinney has been, a really good player at his position at safety. Deontay played some last year in a couple games. But the problem is there's not a lot of depth. Shaheem Carter is a guy that played some last year. And in the front seven, we've got some good guys coming back, but we lost a couple really good players already with injuries, and there's not a lot of depth. So we're going to have to be fortunate to have enough luck to stay healthy enough until we can get some of these younger players who are going to be a bit of a work in progress. And at some point in time in the season, third game, sixth game, fifth game, I don't know when, they're going to be ready to play and they'll be able to contribute more, and hopefully we won't have to count on them until we can get them to that point.
Coach, one thing that has not changed from year to year is our first call of the evening, brought to us again by Alabama 811. Always contact 811 before you dig to know what's below. Call 811 or visit al811.com. Still doing well down in Grand Bay, Alabama. Pee Wee, welcome to the program, sir.
Hey, Eli, how you doing, buddy?
I am well, Pee Wee. How are you? You have a good off season?
I did, sir.
Pee Wee, I didn't really think you would call, because I thought you would be really feeling good about the offensive line. The running backs we have, the receivers that we have coming back, all the tight ends are coming back. So I thought you'd be fishing.
No, unfortunately, that's not the case. I did want to ask about the line, though, Coach.
I figured. After all these years, I figured.
We've got two new guys starting on the right-hand side of the line this year, and then Ross moving in to the center position. My question would be, number one is, how has the communication been along the offensive line? And then also, how is the depth looking on the offensive line? Do we have a good quality of depth so far this season?
Right. Well, I think that the depth question, Matt Womack hurting his foot again and probably out for several more weeks. We felt like we had really three really good tackles. Now there's less experience at that position. Deontay Brown has come along and been a really good inside player. Chris Owens has come along and been a really good inside player to add depth. But I like the way Ross has adapted to the center position. He's playing extremely well. Lester's playing left guard, and he's playing well. And Jonah, the left tackle, is playing well. We do have two new guys on the right side, but they're both really good players. And I think the thing with new players, inexperienced players, and I've noticed this in practice, and I talk to the players about this, they have a lot of anxiety going into the first game. So when they have anxiety, they don't play fast. All right? They're thinking too much. They don't come off the ball. They're laid out of their stance. Same thing with the new guys in the secondary. They've got anxiety. They know what to do, but they're almost afraid to do it. And the only way you can conquer that, in my opinion, is you have to have great preparation. You got to practice. You got to feel very, very confident by the way you do things in practice and how you prepare for the game. That's what gives you the confidence to go out and play in the game and get rid of some of that anxiety, which I think is going to be important for some of these young players in this game. And that's what we've tried to preach to them, all week. So you never know, but we'll see. I know those guys are very capable players. Alex played well at left tackle when he had to. He's playing right guard, and Diedrich is done really well at right tackle. So, the depth situation is not as good as it was since we lost Matt.
Coach, immediately to your right, we have a visitor here at Baumhauer's with a question. Good evening, sir.
Hey, Coach, how you doing tonight?
Doing great. How are you?
Coach, yesterday was Michael Jackson's birthday, and I know you're a huge Michael Jackson fan.
Yeah.
If you had to narrow it down just to one favorite song, what would it be?
Well, that's tough. You know, I love music, and I've got Michael Jackson, Elton John, and the Eagles. You know, and the Rolling Stones. There's 120 songs on my, whatever you call it, iPod or whatever it is. It's outdated, whatever it is, I know that. And they just play over and over and over and over. And you know what? There's not one song on there that I don't like. I like them all. So, you know, we got great boat music. I like them all. There's not one particular song that I can really say that I like better than all the rest. But, you know, Michael Jackson was a great performer. And, you know, obviously a very talented guy and a very talented person who, you know, made a lot of people really happy with some of his music, and certainly thankful for people like him.
I didn't thank you, sir, for your question. I didn't know how I was going to work this question in. They send me the questions from the Nick Saban radio show blog. And I said, how am I ever going to get this in? Mike is in Melbourne, Florida, but since we're talking music, he said, Coach, do you realize that a couple of days before the ball game, Beyonce and Jay-Z are having a huge concert at Camping World Stadium? Are you concerned about the field being in playable shape? I'm sure they've got a great crew there to make sure that the field is ready to go, don't they?
Well, I think they have field turf, so I don't know that there's a big concern about the turf.
Right.
But, you know, I didn't even know there was a concert. And whatever the field is, it's going to be that way for both teams.
Exactly.
So, you know, I mean, they asked me if I wanted to go to the stadium before the game, which we never do.
Right.
But, I mean, I said, is the field going to be 53 yards wide and 100 yards deep? And the guy said, yeah. I said, well, I don't think we need to go.
There you go. And somehow I managed to get this question in. So Mike in Melbourne, Florida, there's your answer about the Beyonce and Jay-Z concert.
Jalen will audible, using hand signals, claps, gets the snap, hands off, Harris breaks free into the secondary, the race is on, 50, 40, 30, Damian's going, touchdown, Alabama, take that on the first play from scrimmage, and a 75-yard touchdown run for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Wow.
He had a couple of those in successive weeks last season. Damian Harris, the senior from Richmond, Kentucky. And you know, Cecil Hurt, you got Damian Harris, you got Najee Harris, Brian Robinson, Josh Jacobs, a newcomer, Jerome Ford. You know, Ronnie Clark carries the rock. Again, lots of talent on that offensive side.
Some games from the end of last season, from November on, I think SEC Network played them all.
Right.
One day, and Damian, I'd forgotten how well Damian ran in the fourth quarter against Mississippi State.
He
when they
did.
were coming back. He's really, Damian's a great representative of the university. He's looks to be in great shape. I think he's going to have a big year this year.
Yeah, we were
Coach
laughing.
would know better than me.
And we were laughing on the practice field one day. He said, I may just have your job one day. I said, well, you know, come on. It's he's a coach. Damian Harris we're talking about. He's just a wonderful young man.
Well, you know, the thing about Damian is he is a great player. He has a great disposition. He's always happy at practice. He always has a smile on his face. But I think, you know, he represents something bigger than all that. You know, so many people say, well, why didn't he go out for the draft? Why didn't he leave school? And, you know, we tell players all the time, you know, I think more and more and more players look at college as a conduit to get to the NFL. Mm-hmm. And really the reason that you go to college is to prepare for the day that you can't play. That's why you go to college, because you don't know when that day's coming. It might not be a pro career. It might be a pro career. You might get injured. There's a lot of things that can happen. And I really think that Damian Harris really enjoys going to college. He really enjoys being a part of a college football team. Mm-hmm. I think he wants to play in the NFL. I think he's looking forward to playing in the NFL. And he will be a good player in the NFL. But he's one of the guys that really love college. He wasn't one of those guys like a lot of our guys that it's almost like they can't wait to go to play in the NFL. And then every one of them, after they've been there for a year or two, they come back and say, man, it's nothing like it was when I was playing here, you know? And so I guess it's a lesson for all of us that we always can't wait for the next thing. And, you know, you have to enjoy the moment and, you know, the challenges that we have. And, hey, life's difficult. It's tough. We all have problems. That's the way it is. But it's how we affect those challenges and how we affect the people around us. And I think Damian Harris does a great job of doing that extremely well.
He really does. Steve is on the phone in Pace, Florida. Steve, welcome to the Nick Saban Show.
Thank you, Eli. How y'all doing tonight?
Good, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing well, Coach Saban. I want to say that the national championship game, I just want to say how proud I am of the whole team for winning that national title last January. And the two freshmen, Tua and I think Devontae Smith, that caught the pass, and the whole team all together. I mean, I think I bit my nails the whole night over that whole game, but it was just a great ending to a very bad first half. But I mean, I'm just glad everybody pulled together and it was a good outcome. But looking forward to the game on Saturday and the opening game, and I had two questions for you. Is it a rumor, I don't know if it's a rumor or not, that Rashad Johnson was coaching some of the defense on for Alabama this year? And what kind of an impact would he have if he did that? And the other question is, do you allow Miss Terry to decide who takes the first snap of the ball game this year?
You know, Miss Terry has her opinion about that, and I do ask her. And she's usually right, to be honest with you. She's usually right on. So I'll stop at that. I don't want anybody to think she's coaching the team or anything, but she has her influences, I will say that. You know, Rashad Johnson is a guy that is not really allowed to coach the players. We gave him a position to be sideline reporter, I think, at the home games or at the games this year, at all the games. And, you know, he's a very bright guy. He was a great player for us. He was a walk-on here that got put on scholarship and was a fantastic player, and then had just a wonderful, you know, NFL career. And, you know, he had come to me like a year ago and said that he would like to get in coaching. And when I have about 6 guys that are former players here that had NFL careers that want to come back and be coaches, and I can't really hire them all because we have so many people already. So I told him, as soon as we get somebody an opening, I'd like for you to be an intern. Well, an intern can't really coach the players, but he's there to learn. He does paperwork in the office. He does administrative duties. And he can have input in terms of some of the things that we do based on his experiences. He was also an intern for the Giants and worked with Landon Collins up there as a safety for, you know, a little bit before we started him on August the 15th. So he is on the staff now, but he really can't coach the players, but he does have an opportunity to have some input and to learn and grow. And he would be a great guy for us to get on the field if we could get him on the field someday.
Cecil.
Another position moving back to offense that don't mention the guys very often, but you seem to be pretty deep at tight end and kind of different skill sets for different guys. Who is it depending on how you line up as to who's out there first or plays the most, I suppose?
Well, we feel like we have 5 guys that can contribute at tight end, and probably 3, you know, that will play a little more than the others because of their experience. And they're all a little different skill set. You know, Hale has been a starter around here for a long time and is a great person, great leader, really bright guy that seldom makes any mistakes. And he's always going to do the right thing, and he's physical and he's tough. He's a good blocker, so and he's capable as a receiver. And, you know, Irv is a really good all-around player, probably can do everything at the tight end position. But, you know, tight end is different than what most people think out there. Tight end thinks that what Ozzie Newsome did at tight end years ago, where he played beside a tackle with the hand in the dirt, is a tight end. A tight end is 3 things now. A tight end is got his hand in the dirt some of the time. Very seldom, if you really watch football now. He's off the ball quite a bit of the time doing what an old-fashioned fullback used to do, whether it was in the I formation or whether he was offset. And then they become wide receivers in a lot of four open sets. So to really be a good tight end in this day and age, you have to have a really, really strong skill set that is unique in terms of size, blocking ability, toughness, which may be a big man that you have to block. You know, if you're in what I call the C area beside the tackle, all right, then you got to be athletic enough to make the space blocks like we call them slider plays, like a fullback would make. And now you're out there playing wide out, you know, with probably a DB covering you. So, you know, Irv probably has more diversity as a player than any of our tight ends to do all those things somewhat well. And, you know, so we got a pretty good set of guys there, and I think they'll all make a good contribution. Miller Forstall is a good receiver and a good H. So they all have their roles, and they all have things that they can do well. And we have a couple good young players that I'm sure you'll see a lot of this year, too, at that position.
Right, Irv had 14 catches last year for 3 touchdowns. A visitor here at the restaurant with a question. Good evening, ma'am.
Hi.
Hi.
I really enjoyed the ESPN training days that happened over the last 4 weeks that we saw. That was great to see the inside of the program. And I was particularly interested in the segment with Kobe Bryant. And when you and he were talking in your office, y'all seemed to be on the same wavelength about a lot of things and how you agree with things. And I noticed when he was talking to the team, you were taking a lot of notes and you were really paying attention to what he said. And I guess my question is, what did you take away from talking with Kobe that maybe you had not thought about before to instill in the program, or how he thought about something that might be different than you, even though y'all did have a lot of similarities?
Well, Kobe Bryant is one of the most impressive people in terms of talking to a group. And he didn't really give a speech. You know, we really just asked him questions, and he responded to those questions. But, you know, he talked about falling in love with the process. I never heard it put that way. And he said he was driven to be the best, and he fell in love with the process of what he had to do. And, you know, this all came about when one of the players asked him, how'd you score 60 points in your last game that you played when you were like 40 years old? And he said, well, I worked 8.5 hours a day for 365 days in the year. He said, they don't put that part on ESPN. I was driven to be able to continue to play at a high level for my team, to be the best. All right, so nobody had to motivate me. He said motivation is BS, because people who are really successful are driven to be the best. They're not affected by external factors, and they are driven, and they're willing to do the things they need to do to be the best. He asked the players an interesting question. He said, how can you not give 100% when it's 100% your choice to give it? Pretty interesting for all of you. How can you not give 100% when it's 100% your choice whether you do it or not? Can't blame anybody else for it. So it really was, but you know what? All the really great players that I've ever been around, that I had the opportunity to talk to, you know, they all had the same, they have the same driven, want to be the best, work to be the best, have great work ethic, have great discipline, you know, great competitive spirit, don't get affected by things in games. So he was really, really interesting, you know, some of the things that he talked about. And, you know, he told the players one of the things I've never heard it put this way. He said, you know, some of you guys need to edit your life. I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, you guys all want to do things. You say you want to do things, and but you're not willing. What are you willing to give up to be able to do them? Not what are you willing to do them. What are you willing to give up? Because you're going to have to give up something if you really want to be good. Can't do everything. And he was really, really good, really, really interesting. And, of course, the players were very captivated by his presence, because he has a great presence. And I will say this, whatever Kobe Bryant chooses to do with in the rest of his life, he's going to be really successful at it. I can promise you that.
Yeah, he will succeed. Was it odd having cameras following you around all the time? Did it take a while getting used to that, or was it you just go back to
I
business?
never noticed it. I never even noticed it. I haven't watched the training days, and I probably won't. I'm glad to hear that people think they're good. I think that everybody should probably understand the reason that we did it is I felt like our program was being misrepresented in a lot of ways by a lot of people. We get a lot of negative recruiting. People beat us up in a lot of ways, in a lot of unfair ways, and a lot of things that aren't really true. Like we're a football factory. We don't care about the players. We don't, a lot of things like that. Nobody has any fun. I mean, it's ridiculous. So, ESPN wanted to do it for the whole season. And I said, I'll let you do it in fall camp, but when it comes to game week, you're out. All right, so I wanted to reestablish the kind of image in our program that we have, all right, in terms of all that we do for the players, whether it's personal development, academic support, career development, all the things we do to try to help them be the best players they can be. But a lot of lessons that they learn to be the best players are the same lessons they need to learn to be successful in life. So, I just was kind of tired of being misrepresented in so many ways, and I just wanted people to see it for themselves. This is really how it is. It's not what you're being told. This is how it is. So everybody has the opportunity to see that now.
Well, it was a great 4 hours. Trust me, it really was. We're going to break away and take care of a little business here.
Watching now as the throw is caught. Devontae Smith across the middle. He's taking it in. Touchdown! Touchdown! Touchdown, Alabama! 26 yards with 25 seconds remaining. Alabama scores with 25 seconds to go to take a 30-24 lead over a Mississippi State team that is now shocked, along with their fans, into abject silence here in Starkville.
That was quite a finish. Everybody remembers Devontae from the championship game. You can't forget that one. There wouldn't have been a championship game potentially if not for that catch.
Probably not. I'll tell you what, too, for an open stadium like that, and I don't know how much you're aware of it, but late in the game we're down.
You're on the field, sure.
That was loud.
Yeah.
At Starkville last year, and to put together a drive like that. In those, it's not 100,000 people, but it's 50,000 people with 50,000 illegal noisemakers is what it is.
I hear you. Yeah, it is a noisy spot. Coach Saban joins us. Coach, I was just watching here the kickoff of the Texas A&M Northwestern State game. First kick was taken, fair catch at the 3-yard line by the receiver. And, of course, now with the new rule, they move it to the 25. Tom Stipe said in my ear, our producer here, he said, I wonder if we're going to see more squib kicks or something to keep the ball alive. What do you think of this whole deal with them getting an extra 22 yards? And I understand it's because of player safety. What do you think, though, in general?
Well, I have an opinion about what I thought would be a better rule. So it is what it is. And look, I'm number one, 100% for whatever is best for player safety. And there's going to be a lot of changes in the NFL this year on kickoff and kickoff return because that is viewed statistically as, one of the more dangerous plays in football.
Sure,
so
you're going from a standing start in the NFL now.
Right. So, but, in the old days, which is when I played, the old days, the ball was kicked off from the 40-yard line, not the 35. In college football. So I thought if you just moved back up to the old rule, which the reason we moved it back was the kickers got better, their length got better, so there were more touchbacks. So if you wanted more touchbacks, would eliminate the kickoff return, just move it up 5 yards, but you would not change the strategy involved in sky kicks, squib kicks, things that you do to try to create field position at certain times in the game. Just like at the end of the game. A sky kick is really, really an important kick to be able to cover. Hopefully they can't return it so you don't give up a touchdown, late in the game or, at the end when you take a lead and there's a short amount of time left in the game. Well, that now is going to get fair caught, and they're going to get the ball on the 25-yard line. So they took out some of the strategic things in the game, which I think they could have saved just by moving it up 5 yards, because it would have been almost a touchback almost every time,
Sure.
which would have been benefited player safety. So, but it is what it is. I just hope that every game doesn't turn into a fair catch. It's not going to be our philosophy. We work hard on kickoff return, so we're going to try to return the ball if we get returnable kicks.
Yeah, well, as you say,
and even if we get alternative kicks, we're going to try to return the ball.
As you say, the stats are clear. More injuries happen on kick returns, guys busting up the wedge, what have you, than in any other element of a ball game. Cecil, go right ahead, jump in again.
We've talked about this before at the time that the NCAA changed the rule, but this week, at this point in the week, you're putting together travel squads, you're looking at rotations. How's the 4-game redshirt rule going to affect that?
Well, I think that there's a little strategy involved in it still, but not as much. We would normally, typically, sit down and we would put freshman players in 3 categories already for this game. All right, we would say these guys are going to play enough to impact their development. So we're going to play them. All right, so there's no plan to redshirt them at all. All right, then we would have a second set of players, all right, that we would say these guys may be able to contribute and help us at some point during the year, but it might depend on injuries, it may depend on their development. So we're going to hold them out and see if by game 5 or 6 their role might improve or enhance to the development so that it would be worthwhile to play them. Those guys, we don't have that category anymore. So we can go ahead and play those guys. So if we play them in a game or 2 to find out, then we decide later whether we just play them or try to limit them to 4 games. And then there was a category of guys that we pretty much felt like, these guys need a year of development. They need to, whether it's physically, emotionally, maturity-wise, whatever, they're probably not ready to contribute or play. And if we play them, they're probably not going to play enough to enhance their development. So we still have categories, but the second category is almost eliminated, especially right now, because we could play those guys for 3 or 4 games, then decide we don't need to play them anymore.
Sure. Interesting. We're going to come back. We're going to take care of one final break here and get a few final thoughts from the coach when we return. Don't forget, Saturday, our coverage from Orlando begins at 4 o'clock. The kickoff a few minutes after 7 Alabama time for the Tide and the Louisville Cardinals. As you're listening to the Nick Saban Show, presented by Alpha Insurance. Well, that's a call that I'll remember forever. Where were you, Cecil, when that play unfolded?
In the press box, which in the new stadium in Atlanta is
in the end zone.
Basically in that end zone.
Yeah.
I was the opposite corner, or Tuscaloosa News seats were the opposite corner. The other guys had gone down when I'm writing on a deadline like that. Mm-hmm. Particularly when you're having to rewrite the lead every 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So you stayed upstairs while the other guys went downstairs.
So I saw it from upstairs, and obviously from that vantage point, you knew if the guy didn't drop the ball, it's a touchdown.
Sure.
You knew if Devontae held on to the ball, that it was a touchdown. Yeah. So you get to start writing a new lead to the story.
Exactly. By the way, Texas A&M tonight playing Northwestern State, and the Aggies have taken a 7-0 lead in that ball game. Travion Williams running for a 73-yard touchdown. One of the teams with new coaches in the SEC. It was like a who's who, literally, who are you at the media days this year?
It's some of them you recognize. Obviously, Jeremy's new, but
sure.
Jeremy, and Dan Mullen is technically new, but he's been in the league
We've
for
known
10
him,
years.
sure.
And so now I did not know Joe Moorhead, the new Mississippi State coach,
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
At all. So, it's funny. I'm going to borrow somebody else's line, but as of right now, nobody in the SEC is on the hot seat. As of Monday night, that will change.
Probably
somewhere.
so,
I don't
yeah.
know where.
Yeah, never
But
know.
somebody's going to go onto the
Yeah.
proverbial hot seat. So
Indeed so.
that's just that's just the nature of the game. And,
Yeah. It is, but it's very interesting. A lot of new names, new faces, new positions. Coach, one thing that has not changed in this season where there's lots of changing is our friends at Mercedes-Benz are back again sponsoring your final word on the broadcast. Mercedes-Benz presenting the final word. They are the best or nothing. What's on the agenda for you here in this very first week? What's on your mind of the many things that you've got to deal with?
Well, I think the number one thing for this team is, what about self-respect? What kind of identity do you create for yourself? When you go out there and play the game, have you prepared? Have you put the work in? Have you planned? Do you have the discipline? Can you give effort? Can you give up selfishness? Can you give up all those things? So that when you come off the field and look in the mirror, you can look at yourself and say, I have a lot of self-respect for the way I played, the job I did, how I did it, how I supported my teammates. So, that's really, really important to me, and how we do that in the first game. And it's always amazing to me, and I think I've talked about this, to other people or on other shows to, the people out there is, we always get motivated by somebody else. Somebody else dogs us. We're playing against somebody and they make us mad because of something they said or they did. So all of a sudden we play better, right? Because we felt like we were disrespected by somebody else. And I can never understand why it's not important enough to you to have the self-respect to know you did your best, to be the best you could be if you have the opportunity to do it. I could never get that one. Like our guys, when somebody says something about them on the other team and it makes them mad, and they go out and really, really play well. And I'm saying,
Why aren't you doing it anyway?
Why aren't you doing it anyway?
Yeah.
I mean, if you have any self-respect and you want to be the best player, which creates value for you, you all say you want to play in the NFL, you want to be the best player, you say you want to win a championship, you want to do all these things, but it takes somebody else to say something bad about you to make you jacked up to be able to do it. So I guess it's human nature. But to see how this team responds, to see the kind of discipline that they can play with, how can they sustain. The guy talked about the game, talked about how bad the first half was last year. When people say things like that, it kind of disappoints me. Because we don't have perfect players. And everybody's not good at everything. And sometimes we play other people that have pretty good players and they have great competition. And we're not always going to dominate, everybody that we play. And certainly last year's team at the end of the season struggled, in that way. We struggled at Mississippi State. We struggled at Texas A&M. We got beat by Auburn. All right, and, we played really well against Clemson, but we struggled a little bit. All right, so we had a lot of injuries. We had a lot of things happening, and that happens sometimes to your team. But one thing that team had that everybody should have tremendous respect for is resiliency. They came back in games. They came back from deficits in games. They responded well every time something bad happened. I mean, it was pretty amazing. We'd lose a player, the next player would step up. All right, so does this team have that kind of competitive character? That's the biggest thing for me in this game. And this is a huge game for this team to create its identity, a huge game, to me. And I know everybody, thinks about playoffs and championships and all that, but for us to have a good team, we have to show that we have those kind of intangibles. Willingness to play with effort, willingness to play with toughness. And nobody really knows what toughness is. Everybody talks about it all the time, but nobody really knows what it is. What's it take to break you? I tell our players that all the time. So we have some player get mad in practice and go off and get an emotional penalty and get kicked out. I mean, what did it take to break you? Whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, you get tired, you can't go anymore. What did it take to break you? I mean, that's what it is. When we're putting storm windows, hurricane windows in our house in Florida, you know how they figure it out? How much wind does it take to break them? They put that stuff on the bottom of Humvees, that they run over there in the war. What's it take to blow them up? What's it take to break you? physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically. So that's what toughness is. Do we have that as a team? Can we be resilient and overcome things? And when something bad happens, play the next play. All right? And does this team have their face set on what they want to accomplish and what they're willing to do and give up to do it? So, and you know, those things are really, really difficult to do when you're having lots of success and you've had success, and a lot of guys on this team have been to playoff games and won championships. So it's a challenge. It's one that we're looking forward to. We got a lot of new faces, and it's going to be interesting to see how they respond out there. But I think the number one thing for our fans is you need to be supporting these players and the young players that we have in a positive way. You know, don't run around with some great expectations about what we're going to do just because we're Alabama. That doesn't matter. You support this team for what they can do with the players that we have on this team, and they will develop into being a good team and good players, and that's what we need our fans to do.
It all begins this weekend. Coach, thank you. Look forward to another season with you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks,
sir.
Cecil. Yes, sir, buddy.